It is said that the Prophet Muhammad himself said, "Verily you shall conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful leader will her leader be, and what a wonderful army will that army be." It would take one legendary leader to fulfill this prophecy: Sultan Mehmed II, better known as Mehmed the Conqueror in the West, or Mehmed Fatih by his own people. 23 armies tried to take the fabled Big Apple but failed. One of the biggest and final threat to the millennium old, now only Eastern Roman reign comes from the Ottomans. They were once former Anatolian warlords and nomads who had, after Osman Ghazi's dream, transformed themselves into an urban civilization after Osman's son Orhan captured Bursa in 1326. Subsequent sultans would reach all the way to the gates of Vienna twice, and until 1686 the so-called Ottomans' westward threat on Europe would be stopped. Throughout history, Constantinople was the center of trade and commerce due to its strategic location. It was filled with culture, science, and wealth when London or Paris sat in the Dark Ages. As Constantinople was defended by walls, with the inner wall standing at 40 feet high and 15 feet thick. Along the wall ran 96 massive towers at 175-foot intervals, but what made the city seemingly impenetrable was its location on the Bosphorus, and that its harbor, or the Golden Horn, was protected by a large boom chain connected by towers on either shore. This was built in the 8th century by Emperor Leo III. When Emperor Mehmed II ascended the throne for the second time in 1451, he went about strengthening the Ottoman navy and made preparations for an attack on Constantinople, which had been the capital of the Roman Empire since 330 AD under Constantine the Great. In the following 11th centuries, the city was besieged many times but conquered only once, in 1204 by the Fourth Crusade, which set up an unstable Latin state. The Byzantine Empire would splinter into three parts, namely Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond, who would fight as allies against the Latin establishment and amongst themselves for the Byzantine throne. The Nicaeans would eventually reconquer the city in 1261 and re-establish the Byzantine Empire. On the Bosphorus Strait, the Ottomans erected a stronger fort called Rumeli Hisarı, the first one being Andalusian, built by Sultan Bayezid I on the Asian side, while Rumeli Hisarı was on the European side, which gave the Ottomans complete control of the strait. Both forts were opposite to each other and gave the Ottomans complete control of sea traffic. After the fortress was completed, the Ottomans went about levying tolls on ships passing by that were in reach of their cannons. A Venetian vessel ignoring signals was sunk, its sailors beheaded and captain impaled, and used as a human scarecrow as a warning for future sailors on the strait. When the Ottomans approached Constantinople, they found the grave of Abu Ayyub Ansari, a companion of the Prophet, who had died in the first siege of Constantinople from 674 to 678 AD. After the conquest, Fatih Sultan would commission the Ayyub Sultan Mosque at the site to emphasize the importance of the conquest and highlight his role as a Ghazi. In 1453, Mehmed commenced the siege of Constantinople with an army of about 200,000 troops and a navy of 320 vessels. When the time for the siege came, Europe could only muster little assistance, stemming due to the divide and mutual hatred of Western Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Church. The assistance that did come was from an accomplished soldier from Genoa named Giovanni Giustiniani. For the defense of Constantinople, the ruling emperor Constantine XI had precious metals held by churches melted down to pay for the cost of the battle, and he had promised the clergymen he would repay them fourfold once the battle was over. Mehmed also employed the services of Orban, a Hungarian iron-maker and engineer, to make him a giant cannon, the likes of which were never seen before, for bringing down the famed city walls. This was the first time cannons were used in warfare, thus city walls would become obsolete, and modern era, according to historians, would be ushered in. The Ottomans continuously bombarded the city until a small breach was opened and exposed the inner defenses. Constantine would grow anxious and send messages to Mehmed, begging him to withdraw, and would offer him tribute as well, but Mehmed would respond by his famous words, Either I will take the city, or the city will take me. It was soon seen that the walls were holding firm, so a new strategy had to be developed to prevent the collapse of the army. On 22nd April, Mehmed would transport his lighter warships overland to bypass the boom chain and into the Golden Horn's northern shore where the city walls were less defended. This was done by one of the most daring ways in military history. 80 galleys were transported from the Bosphorus after paving a route around the Genoese colony of Galata of little over 1 mile with wood. The galleys were heaved overland by workers pulling at them with ropes. Thus the Byzantines had to stretch their troops over a longer portion of the wall, and after a month later Constantinople would fall on the 29th of May. Such a feat could be compared to Hannibal crossing the Alps in the Punic Wars or Napoleon crossing the Alps on a sure-footed mule in his war against the Habsburgs. Mehmed would move his capital from Adrianople, modern-day Edirne, to Constantinople. It is said that Venice was sending a relief force, but it had arrived too late near the Dardanelles when news of the city's capture was announced. Constantine would die the day the city was captured. It is said he died heroically defending the city because, in his own words, God forbid I live as an emperor without an empire. It is said that his daughter would escape to modern-day Russia. After the capture of the city, Mehmed claimed the title of Caesar of Rome or Kaisar Rome. The fall of the city would have a positive impact for the Western world as Byzantine scholars and artisans who immigrated to the West played a key role according to many scholars in the revival of Greek and Roman studies that would lead to the Renaissance. Amongst the scholars would include writers, poets, humanists, lecturers, musicians, academics, scientists, and so on. By 1459, Mehmed had devoted considerable effort in restoring the Big Apple to its former glory. The Sultan would found mega foundations in several new quarters, such as a theological college now known as Istanbul University, schools, and a mosque named Fatih Mosque with public kitchens. He also sent out orders that Greeks who had left the city as slaves or refugees should be allowed to return and set up their own businesses. In order to further repopulate the city, he deported Muslims and Christian groups in the Balkans and Anatolia and forced them to settle in Constantinople. It is said that taxes were waived for their businesses as well. In keeping with his own faith and to bring back the heritage of the city, Mehmed restored the Greek Orthodox Patriarchate in 1454 and established a Jewish Grand Rabbi and an Armenian Apostolic Orthodox Patriarch in the city. According to surveys, these efforts would lead to 16,324 households in Constantinople and Glata and 3,927 ships. 50 years later, Constantinople would become the largest city in Europe. The city would serve as the imperial capital from its conquest to the Turkish War of Independence, when in 1923 the capital of the newly found Republic of Turkey under Ataturk was moved to Ankara. Even today, Istanbul ranks as the most populous city in Europe and the 15th largest and with an economy of USD 538 billion GDP.